Hi, it's Cara Riley, and welcome to the Landscape Photography Show. This is the evolution of the Landscape Photography Daily Photography theme page at Google+, and we are so excited today because we are going to have Mark Johnson. That's who you saw when the video started. I'm in charge of the blue box, and you got Mark to begin with, and he is an Adobe Photoshop luminary. So we are going to learn all kinds of very fun things about editing. And so we'll start the show by introducing our curators for the landscape photography theme. And we'll start here with Margaret Tompkins, who actually started this theme page. So Margaret in Kansas City, welcome.
Hi there, Cara. Really great to be with you today, and I know this is going to be an awesome show. I just think the world of Mark Johnson, and the whole world needs to look at what he does and how he does it. Really going to be fantastic. And I'm here in Kansas City. I'm retired and an amateur photographer. I've just been to the garden center and got me some new flowers. I'm going to go plant them, and then I'm going to take photographs of them. So that's my agenda for today, and it's so great to be here with you today.
Welcome to What's happened here? This is the evolution of that. Okay, there's one of those gremlins we were talking about.
Live shows.
The YouTube channel was open and it was on delay. So there we go. We have gremlins. They're done. So Margaret's going to plant flowers and take pictures. We're excited.
Absolutely.
That's great. So now we're going to go here to Tom Harrell. So Tom, tell us where you are in the world. That's what's so fun about Google Plus, is we connect with people all over the country, all over the world.
Oh, hi, Cara. I'm located in Carmel, California. This is my first participation in the show, so I'm glad to be here today, and I'm also looking forward to learning from Mark. I've seen some of the work on his website, and I think we're all going to learn a lot this morning, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, that's great. So here, I'll come back. I'm Cara Riley, and founder of the Photo Tour Global Directory. I'm a small business consultant and an aspiring amateur photographer who actually does not really know how to edit my photos. So now that we put this all on the table, we're going to introduce our guest today, who is going to make us all feel better about what it is we can do with our photography to take it to the next level. And that's a fun thing we were talking about in the green room, of how important it is to actually be able to take those photographs to a different level. Mark is I loved this description, an Adobe Photoshop luminary. Yeah. That is such a great adjective because it makes the light shine, and we've had classes on light, and so he is an author, and he's a passionate instructor. And I think one of the things that touched me is that he's so genuine, so from the heart, and so willing to help. And we'll talk about all his free tutorials. I mean, it's just amazing, the gift that he has for us today. He's with the Rocky Mountain School of Photography, the Radiant Vista, Boulder Digital Arts, and he can be hired as a consultant individually. So today he's going to be talking about simulating a graduated neutral density filter. That's over here for me, but we're going to learn. I'm so excited. Another key is replacing skies. And this past weekend we were on a photo tour at the Grand Canyon, and it was smoky, and the sunrise just really didn't happen. So Mark's going to help us with that. He's going to also be talking about content-aware scale to compress middle grounds. So, I mean, there's some Greek for me. But I think one of the other great things about Mark, he has appeared on the National Association of Photoshop Professionals. He's Planet Photoshop websites. He's been featured in Photo Technique, Nature's Best. I think you've been with Jane Goodall. I mean, this these are amazing things that you work side by side by Adobe's Chief Executive Officer, and the U.S. Ambassador to Finland, Academy Award-winning director, Louis, and you got to tell me that one, Mark.
So yes.
Okay. But anyway, so it is my pleasure from my backyard in Colorado a long time ago, Boulder, Colorado. We have Mark Johnson with us. Thank you,
Well,
Mark.
thank you so much, Cara. It really is an honor to be invited to be on this show. I'm so happy to be here, and I appreciate that wonderful introduction. But what I like to do right off the bat is just let everybody here know that none of those accolades, none of that stuff is what I am about. What I am about is a passion for creating. I use my camera and I use Photoshop to create images that resonate with me personally and that get me so excited that I can't help but share what I've learned with whoever is willing to listen. So I want to thank everybody who's tuning into this show for being my audience and listening to what I have to say. I just I love to share. I do it enthusiastically, and I like to do it in a very supportive and encouraging fashion. So as I go through these tutorials today, I am going to begin at the very bottom, as if a person doesn't know Photoshop at all, and I'm going to explain things in a very step-by-step fashion. I know we'll also have some experts who are tuning in, so I'll probably pitch out some keyboard shortcuts along the way, but this is really going to be an inclusive and fun, exciting, inspiring series of tutorials that I just can't wait to share with you.
Great.
Well, we're excited, Mark.
So, Cara, should I go ahead and dive right in to the tutorial?
You should. And if anybody, we shared your photo this morning of a book coming right out of the beautiful green grass. What an image that was. And it's like, oh, well, luminary is the word. So just start right in there. And we love the fact that you're going to talk to us where we are, and just in our green room, Mark, we pick up things that we know, but the other person doesn't. And so anything you pick up, it's just marvelous. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm going to begin the process today by talking about how to simulate a graduated neutral density filter. Now, some of you have probably worked with graduated filters. Others probably have no idea what they are. So let me first explain what that filter is and why you would use it. As landscape photographers, we've all been in the field, and we've seen beautiful settings where perhaps there is a mountain range lit up with stunning alpenglow, and the foreground is a meadow of wildflowers. And so we want to grab this photograph, but when we grab it with a single exposure, you might find that although the mountains are exposed properly, the meadow of wildflowers, which is in the shade, is just too dark. And so in the olden days, back when we were still using film, we would use a graduated neutral density filter to knock back the exposure for those bright mountains so that it would be more consistent with the meadow of wildflowers in the foreground. So in other words, you're trying to equalize the exposures. Well, now that we're shooting digitally, we don't have as much need for the graduated neutral density filter. What we can do is we can get our camera up on the tripod, and then we can shoot one exposure for the bright mountains and then a separate exposure for the meadow of wildflowers. So, we're on the tripod, we're not moving the camera. The only thing that we're changing is the exposure. And you can change that however you like to change it. I recommend shooting an aperture priority so that all you're doing is you're not changing the aperture or the depth of field. What you're doing is you're just changing the shutter speed to alter the exposure. So in other words, you know, you'll have a perfect exposure for the mountains in one shot, you'll have a perfect exposure for the meadow of wildflowers in the other shot, and then you can use Photoshop to very quickly integrate those two and have one just stunning shot. So that's what I want to show you. Does that make sense, what I'm talking about with the graduated neutral density filter?
Now it does, yes. Those dots have connected.
Yeah, I mean, really, the graduated neutral density filter is actually a rectangular piece of glass that is smoked at the top and it's transparent at the bottom, and there's sort of a subtle gradation between the smoked area that holds back the exposure and the transparent area at the bottom. But again, you don't need that filter. All you need is the passion to do this and Photoshop and the knowledge that I'm about to share right now. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Yes, Tom?
Mark, when you take your two shots, would you meter off the sky, then meter off the wildflowers to get the correct exposure for both?
You could, although I find that metering in this digital age kind of puts me in my left brain. I used to do a lot of metering in the film days. I like to stay in the right brain, the creative side, as much as possible. So I'll usually just fire one exposure, Tom. It will nail the mountains or the meadow of wildflowers. It's going to nail one half of that scene because that's how good these cameras are. And then what I'll do is I'll say, okay, well, it nailed the mountains. Now I need to shoot the wildflowers, which are too dark, so I need to open up. I need to open up and brighten the scene. And so in that situation, I'll usually just do a little quick exposure compensation, maybe a stop or two, fire a shot, look at the histogram, and make sure that I got all the nice detail in that meadow of wildflowers. But metering is, if you're used to metering, is something you like to do, you can absolutely do that, but I don't think it's essential.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and show you how you do this in Photoshop. All right. So we're going to be working with this scene that you see right here. Now, as you look at this scene, which was shot up in Banff, Canada, I think this is actually Lake Louise. I shot it a while ago, but I think it's Lake Louise. And you'll notice that this particular exposure is pretty well done for the mountains. Actually, if I were to redo it, I'd probably hold back exposure there a little bit, but that can be controlled in Photoshop. So it's pretty well exposed for the mountains, but it's dark in the foreground, particularly in the area where you see the boathouse with the canoe and the building that's right there. So this exposure right here is nicely exposed for the foreground, but it's blown out on the mountains. So I'm going to take these two and combine them using Photoshop. Now what I'm going to do is I'm working out of Bridge here, and I know a lot of you work out of Lightroom. If you work out of Lightroom, you can do the exact same thing I'm doing right here to bring these two images over into Photoshop as a layered file. So I'm going to click on the first image, and then I'm holding down Command on the Mac or Control on the PC, and I'm going to image right there. And again, you can do the same thing in Lightroom. Now here in Bridge, I'm going to choose Tools, Photoshop, Load Files into Photoshop Layers. Now if you're in Lightroom, I forget the exact, I'm not a Lightroom user, but I forget the exact menu choice, but when you control or right click on either one of those images that you've selected, you can choose to export those two files as a layered document. All right, so here is the image. You guys still there?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
sometimes I think probably when you're using your keys, it does mute you a little bit, but when you stop, then you come back.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try to work around that.
The joys of Hangouts on Air with all the new tools.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Well, let me know if you're having a hard time hearing anything. It's not coming through clearly. So, all right, here I have the a two-layered document. So when I brought these images in, Photoshop layered them into one document for me. The top layer here represents the mountains. So I'm going to go ahead and call that what it is. I'm going to double click right here on the layer name, and I'm going to type in the word mountains, and I'll try not to talk when I do that because I know I'll get muted.
No, I think it's the typing.
Yeah. Okay. Now the bottom layer represents the foreground or the water. So I'll go ahead and name that appropriately by double clicking on the layer name, and I'll type in water. All right. So we have our two layers named. We know what we're doing here. Next thing we want to do is we want to hide the part of the top layer, the mountains layer here. We want to hide the part of that layer that is underexposed and reveal the properly exposed water on the layer below. All right? The way that you hide something in Photoshop is by adding a layer mask. And a layer mask is wonderful because what it allows you to do is it allows you to apply black paint to the mask in areas where you want to hide part of that layer. So wherever there's black paint, the layer is hidden, and wherever there's white paint, the layer is visible. If there's gray paint on that mask, it means that that layer is partially visible and the layers below it are partially visible. So I'm going to add a layer mask by clicking on this icon right down here that is a front-loading washing machine icon. It says Add Layer Mask. All right, so I'm clicking on the front-loading washing machine, and it's going to add the mask to this top layer, the active layer. Now, in order to hide this, I could either paint with a black brush, or I could save time by running a gradient through the mask, where the black part of the gradient represents what I'm trying to hide on this layer, which is the inferior foreground, and the white represents what I'm trying to maintain. So I'm going to come over here to the gradient tool, right here, and I'm going to pop up to the options bar, right here running across the top of the screen, just below the menus, and I'm going to do a gradient that is black to white. So this is the black to white gradient right here. Then I'm going to use the linear gradient. So if I point to this icon right here, this one is the linear gradient. So I'm going to use that. Now, when I look at this scene, what I'm trying to hide is this underexposed foreground area. The angle of light here is actually, it's not your typical kind of horizon. It's actually at an angle. So the key is that when you run your gradient through here, you want to be perpendicular with your gradient to the existing horizon of the light that you're seeing here. So you want to be perpendicular. I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. Now, before I actually run the gradient through this layer, we're going to take a tiny tangent, and I'm going to show you how the gradient works. So this is not part of the technique. I just want to show you this. I've added a blank new layer here, and I'm going to show you how a gradient works. If I click at the bottom of my document and hold the Shift key so I can draw a straight line, there we go.
Okay, we lost you while you were drawing.
Okay.
There, now, so if you were saying something while you were bringing your black, we didn't hear it.
Letting me know. So what I'm going to do here is hold the Shift key, and then I am going to click and drag a long gradient across this document. I want you to see what happens here. So here goes. See how that is a very long, gradual gradient? Well, watch what happens if I drag a shorter distance. Here we go. See how I get a much more abrupt transition when I drag a short distance. So keep in mind that black on the mask hides the current layer, revealing what's below. So when you look at this layer and you're working on this mask, is the transition of light, and this is a question, feel free to answer, is the transition of light very rapid, very abrupt, or is it long and slow? What would you say?
Fairly abrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah, so it's abrupt. That means you want to drag a very short gradient here so that you're working with that very quick transition. So it's almost like you're putting a hard-edged graduated neutral density filter in here instead of a long, slow, gradual graduated neutral density filter. So let me show you here. I'm going to pull a gradient, and I'm going perpendicular to the light that you see right here. I'm going to pull my gradient perpendicular to that light, and I'm going to pull it a very short distance, and watch what happens. So what happened here is I just laid a gradient in that looks like this. So there's my gradient. It's consistent with the hard edge of light that we have there. If that had been a more gradual transition of light, I would have done something like this. But in this case, it's a hard transition of light, so you drag a short distance, like this. And now let me show you what's visible about the top layer. That's what's still visible about the top layer. It's the part that you care about, the part that you actually want to use from, so that's the proper exposure for the mountains. And then you're getting the proper exposure from the layer below for the water right here. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Promise?
Promise.
It does.
For one who knows nothing, it's great. Had the concept down, but it's like you're masking off what you don't want to show up, and then you're putting it together. You're building a puzzle.
That's right. Exactly. You're building a puzzle. You have two layers. One represents the properly exposed top. One is the properly exposed bottom of the scene. And then using the mask, you're turning each layer into the appropriate puzzle piece. Yes. So the top layer is now the top puzzle piece, and that's all that's visible from that top layer, the mountains. And then the bottom layer, all that's visible from it is the properly exposed water. So it's the water puzzle piece. And you've just brought the two together. And you did it with a mask and a gradient, keeping in mind that black paint on the mask hides the current layer and reveals the layer below. Yep. So that's the idea. Do you guys have any questions about that before I move on?
That was a good start. And, you know, in the green room we were talking, Mark, as people are watching this, tell us about your 101 tutorial that they're going to be able to access for free.
Yeah, so for anybody who is new to Photoshop or intimidated by Photoshop, which, by the way, if you're intimidated by Photoshop, I want to encourage you to give it a try. Just make sure that you tap into the right resources. And by right resources, I mean resources like my Photoshop 101 series that that explain things in very plain English from the ground up, and only show you the tools that you absolutely need as a photographer to create what you want. In other words, Photoshop is daunting because there are so many tools and possibilities. Right. But as photographers who have set goals, really what you want to do, instead of trying to take on Photoshop and learn all the tools and all the menus, what you want to do is you want to say, here's my goal. I want to learn how to do this. I want to know how to do color correction. Where can you find the resource? I want to know how to do, you know, very basic Photoshop. Where can you find the resource? And Carl, responding to your comment a moment ago, the Photoshop 101 series is on my website. I believe Carl will share a link after this is all said and done, but it's msjphotography.com. And once you're there, if you click on the Learn tab at the top of the page, you will come to a page where, running down the right side, you'll see a listing of all my tutorials. And you'll find the Photoshop 101 tutorial series, which is free, by the way. on or in the right column of that page. So that's great for beginners. I mentioned color correction as well. If anybody really wants to learn color correction in Photoshop, I just finished about 3 weeks ago recording a series on color correction in Photoshop. That one is a more extensive series than Photoshop 101, so it's what I call a premium tutorial series. So you'll find that one in my bookstore under, I think it's under video tutorial series or video tutorials. But you know, so as a new person to Photoshop, target what you need, find the right resource, whether it's me or some of these other great experts that are out there, and just tap into kind of one thing at a time. Take baby steps. Don't get overwhelmed, and you're gonna wind up loving it, I think.
So, Mark, the thing that you just talked about that really resonated with me was the color correction. We went to the Painted Desert about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was white sky, and it wasn't very pretty. So for color correction, then I can go to your bookstore and find what I need to correct my color on the Painted Desert.
Absolutely, yeah. If you go to my store, which is a tab at the top of the of msjphotography.com.
I think what you're doing is, this is almost like Cliff Notes for Photoshop, which I know when people are starting to learn at a different age, we process our learning skills are different, and we really just need to know. You know, my husband's a need-to-know husband. What he needs to know, I tell him, right? But what we need to know is what time it is, not how to build the watch. And
right,
that's what,
exactly. Yes, that is exactly it. And you know, I think, well, we live in a day and age here of you know, so many things competing for our attention. One of the things that I love most about this period in time is, you know, when I want to know something, when anybody needs to know something, you can go to Google and you can keyword search it, and it's going to bring up content. And that is beautiful, but it's even more useful if you're able to have somebody direct you to a resource that is taught by somebody who is going to make it easy to digest. And so, you know, that's what I try my best to do with my video tutorial series, whether they're the free ones or the premium ones. That's what I try to do. There are other great people out there. I think there's room for a lot of people in this world, a lot of great voices. So if anybody wants to learn about great resources, I have a lot of opinions about some wonderful instructors that are available, and I'm happy to share that information at any point in time.
I think this is marvelous in that it's, I always thought, like Photoshop is a very intimidating product. I mean, there's a gazillion features and sliders all over the place, and you can mix and match and do all sorts of things. And I use probably 2% of the functionality that's there, kind of like Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
I use about 2%, and I can do an awful lot with that 2%, but at least that gets me started.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I really do think, you know, as a photographer, particularly somebody who's new to Photoshop or new to photography, you know, you need to tap into maybe 10, 15% of what Photoshop has to offer, and that's all you really need to focus on. And then, you know, if you decide to push further, like, you know, like I say, my passion reaches far and wide because I've been using Photoshop now for 20-some years. You know, if you want to get into compositing and things like that, then you need to learn new tools. But don't try to take those on in the beginning. It's just plain overwhelming. So, yeah, it's awesome. We're in a great period in time when so many wonderful resources and instructors are available, and it's exciting. And the what we can now do with digital photography and Photoshop and Lightroom, the immediacy of everything is, what a special period.
Okay, now here's a question from someone who you know, just doesn't know the difference. Now, the difference in Lightroom versus Photoshop for the layers, just like you said, can you do that same thing in Lightroom or no?
What I just showed you with the layers, that is a Photoshop thing. Now, On1 software has created something called Perfect Layers for Lightroom. It's I haven't worked with it, but it's essentially a plugin for Lightroom that allows some layer functionality within Lightroom. Since I haven't worked with it, I can't really comment on that, but it might be worth it if somebody doesn't want to get into Photoshop, they just want to work with Lightroom. It might be worth looking at both Photoshop, which will give you the world if you decide to go for it, or look at Perfect Layers from On1 software and see if that gives them the functionality to do what they need. What we just did there was simply 2 layers and a mask, so I suspect that something like Perfect Layers would give you that capability without having to invest in Photoshop.
I think Lightroom does have their local adjustment graduated neutral density tool that you just use the one image and you can have a local adjustment where you can change exposure within a portion of that image. So you're hoping there's enough dynamic range within your raw file to allow you to get to be where you want to get to, but it's not as powerful as what Mark just showed us.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Tom. You're right. It's both Lightroom's develop module and Photoshop's, what ships with Photoshop is called Adobe Camera Raw, ACR. ACR and Lightroom's develop module are almost identical, and they both have a graduated filter in there that will allow you to darken or lighten a region like what we just did. But the key to that working, as Tom mentioned, is you have to have enough information in your original capture for that to actually work. And in these graduated neutral density techniques, oftentimes the scenes that you're photographing have such a range of contrast, brightness values, that you really need 2 exposures. So it'll be scene dependent.
Well, good, and we'll go on to your next feature of what you're going to help us with, and just letting our audience know we had Jeff Bideau join us from the curating team, the landscape photography curating team. Jeff, you're muted, you can unmute yourself now that you got in, and if you have questions or additions, and for Mark, he's just been wonderful. So thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Glad to have you here, Jeff. And Cara, I think you're going to like this this next topic. It's going to be really pertinent based upon your Grand Canyon shoot. As photographers, you know, we all know that we work very hard. We get up early in the morning to get to spectacular destinations, and we have limited time at those destinations, and Mother Nature does what she does. Sometimes we're delivered stunning beauty. Sometimes we have skies that are severely clear blue skies, or they are completely washed out gray, ugly skies. In scenarios like that where you don't have the opportunity to grab that scene with the beautiful light that you'd like to have, I'm going to show you a couple of techniques here for replacing skies. And what I'm going to do, time permitting, is I'm going to show you kind of a best case scenario technique, and I'm going to show you a worst case scenario technique, because sometimes you have a very clean horizon. For instance, what I'm about to show you, I shot in Death Valley on the dunes. I had a very clean horizon. Replacing the sky there, not hard. But then I'm going to show you a scene where I have a tree with 1,000,000 branches reaching above the horizon, and I want to replace that sky. So I'll show you how to approach that as well. So we have 2 great opportunities to see how to replace skies when Mother Nature just doesn't cooperate and you don't have enough time to stick around. So let me go ahead and dive back into screen sharing and show you what I mean. Okay, here we are. So, in the best case scenario, we have a setting like this, where there is a clean delineation between the dune and the mountains in this case, and the sky. And
well,
so,
we're still seeing black. We're
okay.
fading to black right now, so
Oh, okay.
I just want to click off and then back on your screen
Yeah.
share.
Let me pop over there and turn
This happens sometimes. It just takes a little while to process.
Oop, I think we lost Mark.
There's we did. He'll be coming back. So while he's gone, Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself to our viewers while we're waiting? You're muted. So just go up to the top on the right and click your microphone.
Okay.
There
Can you hear me
go.
now?
There you go. So introduce yourself while we're waiting for Mark to come back.
All right. I'm Jeff Beddoe, and I'm from Bloomington, Minnesota. And if I could, I'd hold up my computer so you could see the clean windows in my studio today because I spent the morning cleaning them. So I do windows.
Well, great. Jeff, thanks. Now Mark's back. So Mark, good time of your disappearance and introducing Jeff, and so now you're back.
Yeah. Well, let's see if my screen share works a little more cleanly here. I am getting a little audio feedback, so keep me posted as to if this seems to be working right now.
Yeah. Well, somebody's got some speaker open because we're getting huge feedback. So maybe Jeff, you might want to mute yourself. I don't know if you've got something on.
There we go. Seems to be resolved.
All right.
Now, and can you see a picture from Death Valley, the dunes?
No,
Yes.
we see me. Oh.
You
No,
can?
I see the dunes.
I'm in front of your Death Valley on my screen. How about you, Tom? There. Now we see it. Now we see it.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Well, and again, just keep me posted if things aren't showing up as I'm speaking about them. But basically, here we have a scene where there's a real clear delineation between the foreground elements, which are the dunes, and the middle ground elements, which are the mountains and the sky. And so in this scenario, this is what I call kind of a best case scenario, but in terms of replacing the sky. But we have a severely clear sky on this day, and I'd like to have some texture up there. So what I'm going to do is open up the dune shot. Let me actually close out this other one. Okay, so here is the dune shot, and I'm going to begin this process by making a selection of that blue sky. Lots of different ways to make selections in Photoshop. One of the very best ways to make probably 90% of your selections is something called the Quick Selection tool. Now, I'm going to go over to that tool right now, and it's right here. Is everybody seeing the Quick Selection tool and the dunes on the screen here?
No, we're back to the water in the mountain. Now we're back to the sand dune.
Okay,
but
so
we don't see your tool yet.
Seems to be a little bit of lag in what I'm saying and what you're seeing. So I'll just talk extra slowly.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm pointing at the Quick Selection tool, which is located just below the lasso tool. And I'm going to use this Quick Selection tool to select that blue sky. And when you have a nice contrast between your foreground and your sky, like I have right here, you're going to be amazed how easy this process is. So I've got my Quick Selection tool. I can size this tool using the right bracket key on my keyboard to make it bigger, or the left bracket key to make it smaller. So right bracket key bigger, left bracket key smaller. I would say if there's one keyboard shortcut you want to learn in Photoshop, that is it, because you're going to be changing the size of your brushes and the size of your other tools on a regular basis. Okay, so I'm going to make this maybe a little bit larger by tapping the right bracket key.
And that makes it larger.
Yep, that makes it larger.
And left
And
is
now I am going to paint over the sky, and look at that. I made a stroke that was, a few centimeters, and it selected that entire sky because we're in the best case scenario right here. Once you have that sky selected, you can then go to your other image, your sky picture, which, by the way, when you're out in the field, if you think you might have a need for replacing skies, improving skies, then shoot skies while you're out there, and try to shoot them with lenses that have a similar focal length to what you would actually use for your landscape. Whatever style you work with in terms of focal length, shoot your skies that way. Try to shoot all kinds of different skies, and keep in mind that when you are compositing, like we're doing right now, a sky into another scene, keep in mind that the angle of light needs to be consistent between the current foreground and the sky you're about to drop in. So where would you say my light is coming from in this Death Valley Dune scene? Is it coming from the right or left?
From the right.
Right. So it's coming from the light, or the right. So that means that I want to add in a sky where the light is coming from the same side. So I'm going to go grab that sky. Okay,
While he's grabbing his sky, you know what makes sense now at Google Plus is all these theme pages. The Sunday sky theme is so that you take skies and have them in your inventory.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you know, another thing that that I do from time to time, I mean, I love to photograph everything I possibly can on my own. But sometimes in life, you simply don't have the resource that you need. And so I think it's perfectly wonderful and fine. And again, you need to be transparent with your process with your audience. But I think it's perfectly fine to go to a stock site and get a sky if that's what you need to do, because you do not own that sky and you don't have the ability to get out there. I think it makes more sense to be able to allow yourself to create images, even if you have to become part of a creative community that's going to help support you by maybe another photographer photographed that sky and you're going to integrate it into your scene. Everybody's going to have different feelings about that, but I just would encourage you not to limit yourself. Allow yourself to be creative, whatever that means to you. And so that's what we're going to do here. We're going to take this sky and we're going to drop it into the other scene. So I need to select this sky, which means I'm going to go up to the Select menu and choose All. So select All. Okay? Did you see me actually go to the Select menu there?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, good. Now I'm going to choose Edit, Copy. All right, so it was Select All. Now Edit, Copy. Now I'm going to go over to my other document, the one where I'm replacing the sky, right here, and I am going to paste my new sky into this selected area. So I'll choose Edit, Paste Special, Paste Into. So the key here is you want to choose Edit, Paste Special, Paste Into. So not just a straight paste, but you're actually pasting into the marching ants selection. All right, there's my new sky. Now, Adobe, when they wrote this software, they were really smart. They knew that when you they know that when you paste into a selected area, that you may want to move your subject within that selected area, within that window of sky up there. You might want to move your subject. So they automatically unlinked the mask, which is our hole. So they unlinked the mask, which is cutting the hole there. Remember, white is what's visible about that layer. And they unlinked that mask from this picture, from the new sky. So they unlinked. That happened right here, right between the picture thumbnail and the mask thumbnail. There is a link. Adobe made that go away. And they did it intelligently because they know that we might want to move that sky. They also made it naturally, or by default, happen that this sky thumbnail is selected. So everything I just showed you there, it's great to know that, but ultimately, if you want to move your sky after you do the paste into step, all you have to do is click on the Move tool right here, and then click and drag your sky. And it's like you're dragging within a little window here.
It's like your cover photo on Google Plus. You can move it around.
Exactly, yeah. So you can position that, you can position those clouds wherever you want them, and you can get the sky that you want up there. Again, you want to make sure the angle of light is consistent. Now, one thing that will happen, even in the best case scenario, is if you zoom your picture to 100% magnification, which means that you're viewing it with every bit of detail that you could possibly ever see on the printed page. When you go to 100% magnification, you're seeing all the detail that would ever show up on a printed page. If you do that, you're going to notice there might be a little hairline between the new sky and the old sky, or between the new sky and the horizon. So I'm going to zoom to 100%. The trick for doing that quickly is to double-click on the zoom tool. So I'll move over here to the zoom tool, which is near the base of the tools panel, and I'll double-click on the zoom tool to zoom to 100%. Now, if I want to move around my screen, I can click on the hand tool here and drag around the screen, or, for those of you who like and are ready for keyboard shortcuts, simply hold the space bar and it will turn. By holding the space bar, it will turn whatever tool you're using into the hand, and then you can click and drag. So now, I know our resolution's not all that great here, so I'm actually going to zoom this past 100%. Do you see a little tiny line on your monitors? Do you see a little line here between the sand dune and the new sky?
Yes.
It's just slightly, yeah.
It's light. Let me go even tighter. All right. So there is a little tiny hairline right there. The way that you eliminate that hairline is this. This is so cool, by the way. You want to activate the mask, because remember, the mask is what's hiding part of your new sky. And the reason that you have that little tiny hairline is because your mask isn't revealing quite enough of the new sky. In other words, it's still showing a tiny sliver of the old sky here. So I am going to work on the mask, which means I will click on this thumbnail that I'm pointing to right now, the one that represents the mask rather than the thumbnail that represents the picture itself or the pixels. So I'm on the mask. That's very important. Now I'm going to choose Select, Refine Mask. Okay, so go under the Select menu and choose Refine Mask. This is an amazing dialog in Photoshop. It allows you to do so many things that I could spend hours talking about this dialog. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to change our view here so that it says On Layers. By choosing the On Layers view, we're seeing our composite of the new sky and the sand dune here. We're seeing that composite actually as it is. So we're working on this. It's like having a live real-time preview of what's going on here. So we're on layers. And is everybody still with me? I just want to check in.
Yep. We are.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're fascinated.
All right. And now if I want to reposition this little hairline, in other words, I want to erode the sand dune a few millimeters here so that I'm not seeing the old sky visible. I can come to Shift Edge right down here, and I can drag this slider to the right. It has now shifted my edge, and I don't know if you can see that very well because I know resolution in these Hangouts isn't all that great, but it actually pushed the edge of my mask so that I'm no longer seeing that old sky there. I'm going to show you another way of looking at this in a moment. It
actually looks like little lines of the sand have blended into the new sky. It does.
There is one artifact that's appeared here, and it's very common that this will happen. What you're seeing is the little sort of lines of the sand, which works for this particular subject, but won't work for every subject you're working on. Those are kind of jagged edges created by the quick selection tool. If I want to smooth out those edges, well, lo and behold, there is a smooth slider right here. So if I drag the smooth slider to the right, and I'm going to go too far so you can really see it smooth out, those little tiny things that we were referring to as sort of ripples in the dune a moment ago, they're gone now.
Right.
It has smoothed that out. The other thing that you're going to encounter in this process is the edge might be a little bit too hard, maybe not consistent with the other edges in the picture at that point in the distance. You know, you might have other edges that are softer or harder than this edge. You want to be consistent with those edges. You can create that consistency using the feather slider to soften your edge, or the contrast slider to harden your edge. So if I go to feather here and I move it, and again I'm going to be a little radical so you can really see this, and I move it to the right, it has now softened my transition. It is blending my edge. It's blended way more than I think it should for this scene, but that's because I just wanted to illustrate what it does. Now I'm going to back it off to something that I think is actually appropriate.
Tom, Mark, could I interject something here?
Sure, yeah.
What I find when I'm using this is it has to do with, is that edge of the dune in focus relative to the rest of the image? And
Absolutely.
if the edge of the dune is in sharp focus, then you go tighter with less feathering. If it naturally is out of focus because your foreground's more in focus, then you can use more feathering and you can simulate the out of focus edge with the feathering tool.
Absolutely, absolutely agree. That is so true. So, yeah, if you think of it, and who was that who just commented? Was that Tom or was that?
Jeff.
That was Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff.
The one with the headphones. I got my headphones on now.
Are you rocking out right now, or what's going on there?
He was giving us some feedback. He just wanted to, get us stressed out a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. If that edge is out of focus, then you're going to do exactly what he said. You're going to feather it a little more. If it's supposed to be a really sharp edge, instead of moving the feather slider, you might move the contrast slider a little bit. But your goal is to create something, an edge back there that looks consistent with other edges that are at that distance or at that level of focus in your scene. So that's exactly right. Now, if you had maybe some shrubs or some trees along this horizon, the other slider that I would look at here, and we don't have it in this particular example, but this radius slider right here does a really good job of snapping your new sky in around the edges of a tree or a shrub or something like that. So definitely think about the radius slider if you have a scenario that's not as perfect world as this one, but not as horrible as what I'm going to show you in just a few moments if I have time. But the radius slider is great for that. Now what we want to do is we want to output this change to the mask to the layer mask itself. So down here where it says output to, we want to set this pull down menu to layer mask, which it's already set to, so I don't need to make a change. And I'm going to press OK, and I want to show you, first of all, here is before. So that's a moment ago. Hopefully you're seeing the little hairline there. And then here is after. So here is after right here.
Yeah,
now,
there's no hairline.
Okay, yeah, and let me show you what happened to the mask, okay? So here's before on the mask. You can see it's a little jagged because of the quick selection tool. Here's after. So you can see how it smoothed out the transition there. And bearing in mind that the white on this mask represents where you're seeing the new sky, and the black on this mask represents where you're seeing none of the new sky. Therefore, you're seeing down to the original photograph, which contains the sand dune.
Was that a keyboard shortcut you used for the before and after?
The before and after, I'm just using Command-Z on the Mac or Control-Z on the PC, and every time I tap Command or Control-Z, I get an undo, redo, just like that.
Okay.
The other keyboard shortcut I used here is I held down Option on the Mac and Alt on the PC, and I clicked on the mask to add the mask. So Option or Alt and click the mask, and you can actually see the mask, and then if you do Option or Alt again, you'll be back to regular. So does that make sense?
Yes, that's awesome. And we can make an executive decision here. We've got Mark, and usually our show is an hour, and people can stop the show anytime and come back. You know, so what do you think? Do you think we should just go on? He had 3 things to share with us. Just go ahead and go on. What's the group decision here?
I'd say go on if Mark can do it.
Yeah, if you're willing, Mark, let's just go ahead. And if people can't get it all in one sitting, they can stop and come back because it's all recorded on the YouTube channel. So just go. Let's go with it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to push forward. I actually have 2 more things I want to show you. One is a worst case scenario sky replacement. And then we can make another decision after I do that if we want to go on to.
Well, yeah, as long as you're willing to teach, because we can just use it in segments. I'm here for you, even if everybody else goes. I'm here.
Okay. Well, all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this document and I'm going to go into the worst case scenario. All right.
That's what I work with every day is the worst case scenario.
Yeah. So again, in sort of the middle case scenario, we would do just what I did there, but we would use that radius slider in the refined mass dialog a lot more than I just did there. I didn't use it all there, and we'd use that radius slider more. If anybody out there is interested in how to make extremely precise selections of difficult subjects,
yes.
I have several resources on my site. First of all, each Thursday I release a free Photoshop Workbench tutorial on a subject that I'm fired up about. And if you just search keywords such as hair or compositing, you're going to find tutorials that address how to make selections of difficult subjects. For those of you who really want to take this to the next level, you love the idea of being able to control your selections in Photoshop, I have another premium video tutorial series in my bookstore that is called Dramatic Portrait Compositing. Even if you're not a portrait photographer, that is where I go under the hood and I really show you how to make great selections. But again, the free Photoshop Workbench resources on my site, check those. I do compile those into DVDs or digital downloads coming up this fall, and so it's possible to gain access to those where you can actually download them, have them available on whatever device you need them on at any point in time, no matter if you're flying through the air or not. So the resources are there. Anyway, so best or worst case scenario. Here is a scene with a tree extraordinarily difficult to select. In fact, I would encourage you, I've been doing this for 20-some years, I would encourage you to not even bother trying to make a selection of that tree. It would be possible, but it's going to be really difficult because if you zoom in, you see all the fine details that are in there, and that's just, certain things in Photoshop you have to know when to say when, and so trying to make a selection of this isn't going to be the answer. What we're going to rely upon for this technique is one of Photoshop's miraculous blend modes. The blend modes blend the new sky with the old scene, and in kind of the we're working on the worst case scenario here, right? But in the best case scenario for this type of situation, a blend mode will blend into your old sky with no more than a few keyboard clicks, and you're done. And when that happens, you can call all your friends and tell them how happy you are. I mean, it's a brilliant, beautiful thing when that happens. In most situations, a blend mode will get you part of the way there. It will help you out with your sky replacement, but it won't necessarily fix the problem without you going in and doing a little bit more work. So let me show you what I mean by that. All right, so I want to bring this sky that you see right here, I want to bring this sky into that scene. Now I know, because of the challenge of the edges in that other scene and trying to make a selection in there, that I'm not going to be able to get this sky into that scene looking exactly like this. But I'm going to be taking kind of the essence of this sky and importing it into the sky of the other scene. So again, as before, I'm going to choose Select All, Edit, Copy. I'll go over to my other document, and I'll choose Edit, Paste. Now sometimes when you bring a new sky in, it's not going to be the same size as what you're working with. If that's the case, you'll choose Edit, Transform, Scale. Or you can, some people are used to working with Free Transform, that's fine too. Edit, Transform, Scale, or Edit, Free Transform, either one is going to work. I don't actually need to scale this, so I'm not going to take the time to go through that process, but I will let you know that when you go to scale your sky, you're going to be grabbing the side handles, the corner handles, and you're going to be scaling it. If you don't hold the Shift key down when you do that, it's going to be changing the proportion, the aspect ratio of your sky. When it comes to skies, that's oftentimes fine. It's not fine when you're compositing other subjects, but it's okay with skies. So you're going to grab corner handles, side handles, and you're going to be able to resize it. When you're done resizing it, you'll tap Return on the Mac or Enter on the PC, and you'll have your sky sized appropriately. In this case, I don't need to do that. So I have my new sky here on the top layer, and there's my scene where I'm trying to replace this sky. Again, I'm not trying to make a selection because I know it's just going to be a real struggle to do that. So what I'm going to do here is hope that a blending mode helps me out. To cycle through the blend modes in Photoshop, you can either click up here where it says Normal and manually cycle through the choices, or what I really prefer to the process of manually cycling through is a keyboard shortcut that will allow you to do this much, much faster and with a lot more ease. So instead of manually cycling through the blend modes, what I'm going to do is activate the Move tool, which is available at the top of the Tools panel here. And now I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to tap plus. Now I might get muted when I start pounding away on the keyboard here, so what I want you to look out for are this menu right over here, the blend mode menu, will change, and you're going to notice that the way this new sky blends with the old sky is going to be altered with each blend mode. Watch what happens here.
Oh. I was going to say we have a psychedelic sky.
Yeah, some.
Now we have a dark sky.
I'm seeing Cara, but not the screen. Cara, you're front and center.
Oh, well, I'm seeing all of his changes. So it must go different ways. Margaret, how about you? What are you seeing?
Well, I'm just seeing my Photoshop. I'm changing the.
No, Margaret. Or
Margaret. Sorry. Yeah.
Are you seeing?
I'm seeing his photograph now, but I had to select it. Otherwise, I was seeing you.
Oh, okay. And I'm not typing anything, and the blue box is on Mark. So just click on Mark. Click on Mark.
I'm back on Mark.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So don't you love the little hurdles?
These are the gremlins, and these are the learning things on each show that we're learning. Thank you for being patient with us.
Yeah. So as it turns out on this particular scene, you're going to notice that overlay blend mode, which is probably, if you had to pick one blend mode to take to that deserted island, this is the one you would take. Overlay blend mode is marvelous, and in this case, what it allowed, let me show you. Here's before the new sky, and here is after. Notice how, and I hope the
we lost you, Mark, vocally.